Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Lucy Schultz, owner of Lucy Schultz Design. Lucy formerly worked at both Fisher-Price and Mattel as a toy and game designer. She's an author and inventor of children's board books and has a full line of educational and family games available online. Lucy, welcome to the binge. How you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me. I really am going to enjoy this. Or so I think. No, I will.
It's all good. Yeah.
I know I will.
Fireside chat, but thank you so much for joining us. When I read your story, it is, it's pretty cool. And I thought we'd maybe jump into that first. The fact that you worked for these huge companies, like these are the big guys, right? These are the main players.
Yeah.
How did you get into that?
It's an interesting story because I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art, which is in Cleveland, Ohio. And I was in the industrial design program, and it's called industrial design. So it sounds like all like industrial, but really it's more designing for industry.
Okay.
And one of my favorite parts, as I was looking over into the other class, they got to do a toy design project, and Fisher-Price came as guests to help out with this whole project. And I was like, oh, how cool is that? I was in my 5th year. They were in their 4th year, and this was the first time they got a chance to do it. So I missed it. I was like, oh, this is terrible. But I was just peeking around and seeing what they were doing. I'm thinking, this is what I want to do. I don't want to be designing boring stuff. I want to design fun stuff. And so I put together my resume and I sent it to Fisher-Price. And when the director came back to school, we were doing a design show.
Yep.
And he saw my resume on the wall next to all of my stuff. And he goes, oh, she sent me a resume. Let me go talk to her. So they ran down to the basement, which is where I was working, because all of the designers worked in the basement at that time, and pulled me out of my studio in shorts and a t-shirt and said, hey, someone's upstairs. They want to talk to you. They're from Fisher-Price. And I'm like, all right. So I just ran upstairs and I got a chance to talk to him. And he said, you don't really have a lot of toy design experience here in your portfolio, but obviously you're interested in it. How about if I give you some projects and you can see how you do with them, and then you can come out for an interview. And I was like, yes.
Oh,
so
man.
Basically, I was in the middle of a car design project, and I talked with my professor and I said, hey, can I forget about this project, and I will be working on these projects because this is what's going to give me a job in the industry that I really think I want to do it. And he said, yeah, I can supervise you with that. So luckily I got to take that quick detour and come up with a whole bunch of ideas and headed out to Fisher-Price, which is near Buffalo, New York. And I had my portfolio in hand and a box full of models and stuff. And it was so informal back then, but also I was just an informal person. And so normally you wouldn't just come with like piles of stuff, but I'm like, I'm showing my enthusiasm here. And I don't know how much detail you want me to get into, but long story short, they hired me on the spot and I went home like singing and dancing in the car.
Oh, I guess so. I think for many people, that'd probably be the dream job, right? Like working on toys, how much more fun could it be than that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it was I think it was even before Big came out. So it was like, oh, hey, that's my job.
So we're now in this role. Did you have the opportunity to come up with kind of your own ideas, or did they give you like a spec and you would have to kind of design to the spec, or how did that work?
So when I very first started out, it was very specific. So rather than just having a whole open canvas of doing whatever you want to do, let's learn the system. Let's figure out how to do stuff. So ironically, this was actually kind of cool. Like this was not at all an insult or anything like this to me, because I got to update or redesign the corn popper.
Okay.
And the one that you push that push toy and it pops up.
I had one of those.
I got to do that. And then I worked on the 35 millimeter camera that used to be like that little box 110 camera.
Yeah.
And so I got to take those classics and bring them up to date. So that was pretty cool. So I got to learn how, injection molding works better and how to do drawings and how to communicate with engineers and what the marketing people expected and that kind of thing, and work on these classics that I knew were going to stay in the line for years. So other projects that I worked on after that, they aren't necessarily classics. So it's a lot of fun because you have a blank canvas, but at the same time, you don't know if it's going to stay in the line. So that was pretty cool.
And then how did you jump from Fisher-Price over to Mattel? Like Fisher-Price was before Mattel, I guess, was it?
Yes. Yeah. So I started out Fisher-Price and I was designing preschool toys. And then Fisher-Price decided to go into preschool games. And so I talked to my boss who had moved over into that area and said, I'd really like to do this. And I was able to do that. And I was thrilled because my parents are educators and their grandparents were educators. Yeah. And so the whole idea of toys with rules and the benefit of getting kids to interact with things and to learn things was so cool to me. So I really enjoyed that. And even as I was a little kid, I was making up games and saying, okay, we're going to play this, Dad. And we'd lay out all those ginormous playing cards on the floor and we would play, crazy games, even like Twister almost with card games.
Okay.
And I just loved it. So
your trip to Mattel then.
So in all of that, Mattel bought Fisher-Price. Oh, and so they took the games group out to Los Angeles. And I was like, no, because I wasn't really necessarily ready to go to Los Angeles, but at the same time, because I was happy where I was at Fisher-Price and I loved the people that I was working with. And so the guy that hired me, my boss, actually went with games out to Mattel. And then they put me in Crib and Playpen, which was designing baby toys. So I just went through all this cerebral stuff, trying to educate children, to entertaining and still trying to stimulate and educate babies. But that was not where my heart was. Yeah. So I called my boss and I said, and I left him a voice message. And I said, hey, how's things going out in Los Angeles? Do you have any openings? What's going on? Just kind of feeling the waters here. Yeah. Hung up. I'm not kidding you. It was like within 15 minutes, he comes around the corner and says, hey, how you doing, Lucy? And here he was back in Buffalo. And I'm like, this is so weird. I just called you. He said, you did. And so I told him what I was interested in. So long story short with that, I was able to get recruited back to doing games out in Los Angeles and picked up everything and moved to sunny Southern California from freezing cold Buffalo, New York.
I think a lot of people would probably be envious of that story and of that move.
Yeah. It was wonderful. And of course we had to buy a convertible too.
Yeah, of course. So how many years in total were you there between like the Fisher-Price and then the Mattel buying Fisher? Like how long were you with that entire organization?
It was about 7 years at each place.
Wow.
Yeah.
So over a decade and a half of experience, kind of understanding how the big guys do it efficiently. Yeah. And then the decision to go on your own and to kind of branch off and do your own thing. What kind of got that going? What was kind of the stimulus to that?
So I was getting older, not that I was that old, but older as far as having kids goes. And I didn't want to live out in California and work more than 40 hours a week and have someone else raise my kids.
Sure.
So as the time clock was ticking, I thought, I've hit a lot of my goals that I had challenged myself to hit, and was like, all right, bite the bullet. This is going to be scary doing this on my own, which is really interesting though, because in hindsight, here I was thinking of playing all of these games and using these toys with me as the kid and reminiscing of what I would want to play with. And then now I was becoming a mom. And so after I left Mattel, I was able to design things from a completely different mindset, because I was designing them for my own children and what I wanted to teach them, or what I felt they needed to learn. And if they had, like my son, he had some aversions as a typical boy to, fine motor skills and wanting to learn certain things, and being able to design, whether they were games or ways to write and do things like that to get him interested in it. And I was like, wow, this is so different, because we would watch all of these moms talk in these mom talks about what they wanted in their, their games or their
Mhm.
products for their children. And then now it was me. And I thought, wow, now I really better understand how to design these because I'm a mom and I understand more how trying to design, like trying to write rules for a game so that a mom can read them with a child sitting on her head while she's trying to read the rules. So that was one of the things I really appreciated too, was just how can I quickly get something communicated so that mom gets it and so she can explain it to her kid and it's fast. What that's a lot different than some of these other games that are for adults.
Yeah.
But it takes a certain knack for that kind of thing to quickly explain stuff, quickly get a mom to get it, and quickly get a kid to get it because their attention spans are so short.
I guess going from designing stuff for other people and trying to imagine what their needs are versus now becoming the end user of what you're creating is got to bring a lot of insight, right? Like you are now able to look at this from a completely different angle, right? And I
completely different angle.
Yeah.
In
a good way, right? In a good way.
Yeah, because I really appreciated seeing both angles. Like I wouldn't say one or the other. Because like when I was at Mattel and Fisher Price, carte blanche, go to the store, buy all the games that you want, come back and play them all. And then when you become a mom and you're taking care of kids and you choose to stay home and not work full time, it's like, okay, we have this much amount of money to spend.
Yeah.
Or, what are we going to spend our money on? What do I need to do? And it was funny, though, going to garage sales and finding my games that I had designed at these garage sales. I'm like, hey, I can autograph this for you. It might be worth more.
That's awesome. And so when you started Lucy Schultz Design, which is now covers off board games and books and board books, can you talk about the different categories of what you've created in terms of your own business now here?
Yeah, I started off on my own designing my own games that were easy to launch. Yeah. So I figured if I don't have to tool anything and I don't have to, buy a whole bunch of parts, I'm going to start with that and see how it goes and learn the process. So we'll start small and then keep expanding from there.
Yeah.
The books that I did, I was very fortunate because there's such a big story behind this, but I'll try to keep it brief, is when I went to Toy Fair, I was able to look around to see what other people were doing. And I found a publisher that was publishing things that matched up with where I was going. And I mean, this is a miracle. You don't just walk into Toy Fair and start talking to people and say, hey, I got this idea. And that works. However, this one time it did work because I ended up at Toy Fair. I was able to go along with another colleague. I bumped into this, iKids company, didn't know really anything about them other than that they published things that looked like they would be able to handle doing what I was doing.
Sure.
And she actually made an appointment, looked at my stuff and said, we want it. So I really, truly say it's a miracle because you don't just go do that. And you can go get an agent and you can submit stuff over and over and over and over again. And that's even happened to me since then. So like there's other games that I've had to submit to different places and cross my fingers and hope that somebody recognizes the value of it. And yet here I walked into Toy Fair and took a chance. So I think what I learned from that is being able to take a chance and just go for it and take the risk to do it. And it started out small with iKids and it was still a lot of fun and it was very rewarding. But just recently, Melissa and Doug bought iKids. Okay. So now Melissa and Doug are publishing it and now it's more considered big time.
So when with your different portfolio, is some of it self-published, some of it's published through Melissa Doug? Like, how does that kind of configuration work?
Yeah, that's a good question because I'm doing both self-publishing and I've self-published books and games.
Yep.
And then I've also been able to do freelance or contract work for other companies and then they'll publish my games for me. So they just pay me a set fee for, I don't want to say literally an hourly rate, but it's like they pay me for a job. Sure. And then I do that and then it goes, to market and that's it.
And then you're out.
There's no residuals or anything like that. But if I come up with a game that's a royalty-based game, or like in the case of these books, then it's a royalty-based thing. And that is really nice, because then they can take care of all the marketing and all of that other stuff. That's one of the biggest things that I've learned to appreciate since leaving Mattel and Fisher-Price, is how important that marketing component is. Because as a designer, most of us don't typically think that way. Just, it doesn't come naturally to us. We are creative. We're still problem solvers, but to mess with all that kind of stuff, I would rather pay somebody to handle that than, because you can spend a lot of time updating and marketing, and then you're not able to be creative in the sense of design. And it's a hard balance to do. So that's why the royalty thing for me feels much more rewarding, because it's not nearly as stressful. It just kind of takes care of itself, and then it can go design another game.
Less risk too, I imagine, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
And so you've actually have some patents, I believe, on some of your products too. Is that the case?
Yeah. So when I worked at Fisher-Price and Mattel, I got some patents on those products. And then when I started doing things on my own, those books, when you go and check out the polka dot books and the easy page turners, I think it was pending. I'm not really sure. It's like you pay attention, but you don't pay attention. When I worked at Mattel, you just did it because I was part of your job. You know what I mean? But it's still cool to be able to say, hey, I have a handful of patents here. That
is cool.
And I didn't ever have to submit them to the patent office, which I wanted to make sure that was clear to all of our listeners here, because that is a much more complicated mess. So that's where the royalty part really comes in handy, because then they can handle all of that stuff for you, and you don't have to. That's where that risk was that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Because you could invest, $10,000 or whatever up front to patent something that doesn't go anywhere. So it's really nice when there's a chance that someone could steal it. However, there's also that chance that if they do take it and then make a deal with you, it is going to be way bigger than if you did it on your own.
How did you find the transition going from the corporate world to the independent world? I know from personal experience, working in a large corporate company where you have very large budgets, and then going out on your own where you have no budget, is quite the transition for some people. Did you find, how was that for you?
That is an interesting question, because I'm not going to answer it how you probably expect me to answer it.
I expect nothing.
Okay. Because you're right about the whole budget thing. However, you would be really surprised. I mean, except for the people who have worked at a company like that, down to the penny, the nitpicking of how to make it the most cost effective is very much the same for me personally. So to be able to do searches to find out who's going to give me the best cost, I had someone else do that for me because they were the cost engineer. Now I have to go and do all of those searches myself to find the best price for things, but it's still very, very similar. The part that I think was the most drastic change or shock was that I could go and buy games and play them almost whenever I wanted to, as long as someone wasn't having a meeting. And there was a plethora of people around that if so-and-so had a meeting or so-and-so had a due date, I could go find someone else. And we could always find 5 or 6 people to play a game, play test a game, play competitive samples, and, just have fun doing that. And all competitive too. Like everyone like, yeah. And when you're doing this from home, where do you find these people to play these games? And then you have to invite them over, and then you have to provide snacks, and then you have to clean your house. And you don't normally have to do that when you're at work. And then to have some, likely victims of children around, they're always the same age, but even though they keep getting older. So like if you wanted to grab a 13-year-old, but your kid's only 6, you're like, how do I find this kid? Which was really still solvable during school. You can just go to a lot of the schools were very much open to having me come in after school during their after school programs and play test the kids. So that was still very helpful. And it was kind of nice because then I could set it all up myself and just do it. And also very rewarding because I could see at the schools I knew which kids had been getting math help, for example, and then to be able to have them play this game, not realizing that there were math problems in the game in order to win. And they're able to figure out the math problems and figure out how to explain to all their friends how to play the game. And I'm like, yes, because it just brought joy to my heart that they were able to understand it and do math and not be frustrated with it and actually enjoy math. So
I hear that a lot from developers. I mean, being a developer myself, it's the reward of seeing others enjoy something you've created or connecting with something you created.
Yeah.
That's worth, I mean, money's nice if you can make money at it, and congratulations to have a company that, can, you can make a living on, but just, man, having that connection, and seeing that, with people in your game, I think is a pretty amazing feeling. There's nothing like it. There really isn't. What would you say is your top? I got Mike Bruner in the lobby here, and he's listening in. He's checking out the website. And he's saying, gosh, there's a big portfolio here. What's the top selling product that you have?
The top selling product that I have is definitely those polka dot books.
Okay.
And I could tell you, I think this would be interesting if you want me to share how I even came up with that idea. Like, where the heck would that idea come from?
So describe what a polka dot book is first, and then tell us how you came up with it.
Okay, for those of the people who can see me, I am going to hold up this book, and there are these dots on the front of the book. I don't know if you can hear the little clicking sounds. Yep. And when you poke these dots, you hear the sound. And if you can imagine, those of you who can't see this, there's, on the lids to McDonald's, Burger King, and you poke those dots down to say, this is root beer, this is not Coke. Yeah. So I had those lids in my possession, and I know how much kids and adults enjoy poking those dots. And basically that was put into this book so that the kids could count. And the way I made the leap between the two was that my son, who was maybe like 3 or so at the time, it's been a while, when he would count, if you count something, like with little kids, they'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah,
they'll forget 9, which ones they counted, which ones they didn't.
Right. And I'm like, how do I get it so that my son can count and know which ones he already counted? And then he knows that there's only 5 and you stop at 5. And I thought, those little dots, you could poke them. And I made these flashcards. And that's what I took to Toy Fair and showed iKids and said, I think there's something here. And
what a smart idea. And Mike, he's trying back in, said he's got 3-year-old twins that would love those books. I echo it. My kids are much, much older now, but when they were, that kind of toddler age, I could see something like this as an obvious decision for a parent who's, sitting down and do nighttime stories with their kids, or even during the day, just trying to do some light education, right? That's this kind of thing.
And so much today, people are going against the grain, or at least trying to go against the grain for at least some of their day, to not be in front of the screen. Yeah. And not use battery operated stuff. Yeah. So to be able to have this and have that tactile feeling happening, and having, being able to hear it and see it, all of those things are so engaging when you're competing with an iPad or some sort of a tablet.
Yeah, you got Bruno in the lobby saying infinite bubble wrap sounds.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
So talk to me really quickly about, is it Kalili? Is that how I pronounce that?
Kalili.
Kalili. So there's something about, this is a fundraiser that was, tell me about this game. What's this all about?
Okay. So over the years, my sister-in-law, she's gone to Africa and on various other missions trips. And so she met these 2 boys in Tanzania, Africa. And in Tanzania, Africa, you can't necessarily be what you want to be when you grow up without the government's approval, from what I understand. So if you're getting free college education, then they're going to say, okay, we have control over it. And they wanted to, one wanted to be a doctor and the other one wanted to be a petroleum engineer. And the government said, nah, we think you should go to school for this. So they were disappointed because I really felt like they were called to do these other careers. And so when my sister-in-law met them, they were explaining this to her and she goes, well, why don't you come to America? So she started a fundraiser to get them like a scholarship to get them to come here to America.
Wow.
And I felt at the time, I can't necessarily just write out a check for thousands of dollars at this time. However, I have talent and time to design this game. And I thought it would be, there's so much more to this, but I'm like just giving you the fast version. And so it's played like Pit, but I made some changes to the rules. So it's real active, commotion, throwing cards around the table, trying to trade cards, but it's all based on Tanzanian fruits and vegetables that cool. The boys liked. And of course, the values of them are also, if they really love pineapple, that's going to be the 100. If they don't like not peas, but beans, that's going to be the 40. And then I had incorporated cards into there that would that you can still use in the gameplay for the sponsors. So everyone who donated some money towards getting this off the ground got their card in there, and that was incorporated in the gameplay as opposed to just thrown in there and thrown away. It's actually part of the game, and that's what makes it different from Pit. And so we're selling these card games to raise money to help pay for their education here in America. And you can learn Swahili at the same time because it's in English and Swahili, which makes it extra special.
So what's have they already come to America, or what's the target date for them to come here?
Okay, so they've
Obviously
come to America,
yeah.
And they have done their undergraduate, and they're both going to, one's going to graduate school to be, actually, rather than a doctor, he's going to be a pharmacist. Wow. And the other one is interning right now, and hopefully going to become an engineer going to grad school and continuing his education. But right now he's I think he's taking in, like, I don't want to say it's an internship, but he's doing a work break in between working here in the United States.
That is an amazing story. And, what a congratulations to you and your sister for, number one, sponsoring these two people, but being able to take things that you're good at and say, okay, how can I leverage this to help others out? I think that's a cool story.
Exactly.
What's next for you? What's coming up? Do you have any other projects you're working on? Is there any big other patents coming down the pipe, or what's
I don't have any big patents coming up. However, I was working on this really cool game because I don't know, I'm sure you and some of your other listeners, it's like you have enough projects going and then, oh my gosh, I got this other good project. I can't let this go. I have to start this one too. And I was trying to work on all the marketing parts of all of my games and focus on that and doing videos. And then I came up with this other cool game idea. And I'm like, all right, I got to do it. We got to at least try it. So that was something that I started right before COVID, and I was about to take it out to test to other families, and then bam, there goes COVID, and passing cards around and mixing with a bunch of different people from different families went out the window. So that is my big project that's on hold right now, because it's going to be, I think it's going to be a really fun game. It's going to be really inexpensive to produce and easy. So I don't have to do a whole bunch of tooling and things like that. I also have another book that I'm working on and trying to coordinate. I'm going to have an interview tomorrow with a publisher to hopefully help bring some people together on this, because it's a book and a toy combination. So you've got funky die cuts and you've got some plastic components to it. And it's not something that I myself can self-publish.
Sure.
So I'm two directions. One, having a publisher help me, and the other one, I'm going to self-publish it, and hopefully, because I usually come up with something every year. And this is the first year that I wasn't able to publish something special for, this Christmas season.
Yeah.
And all of the bazaars and all of the trade shows and like that have been canceled.
Yeah.
And that was a really big draw to get people to touch the games, play the games, and have fun. That Kalili game we played at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, and everyone's screaming and yelling in Swahili. And this other group of people comes by and they're like, are you speaking Swahili? We're like, yeah. They're like, one guy actually was from Tanzania and spoke Swahili. And the other group of people that came by were missionaries into Africa. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. You guys are playing this game, screaming Swahili. We had to come over here and see what was going on. So unfortunately, a lot of that stuff now has to be done virtual.
Yeah.
So
if people do want to order any of the games that you have, or check out the story behind some of these games, can you just maybe mention what your website is so people can find you easily?
yeah, it's lucysdesign.us. So LUCYS design.us.
And I would say that Lucy was incredibly generous in donating a $75 coupon, I guess, or certificate or voucher that we're going to give away on the Board Game Binge. So anybody that's a member, I guess this time next week, we're going to do a draw. Every member gets a ballot. We're going to draw a name. The winner will get $75. We'll connect you and Lucy. You can pick $75 worth of stuff off of her store, and maybe check out some of these items that we're talking about today. So thanks for that. I really appreciate it.
Right, you're welcome.
Kind of you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. They always go so fast. I love your story, and I just want to wish you all the best with your business and your future endeavors.
Well, thank you very much, and good luck to you too.
Take care. Cheers.
Cheers.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.